I learned the value of trust the night a customer didn't churn even though we deserved it. We had messed up badly. A feature failed at the worst possible moment, cost them time, money, and embarrassment in front of their own clients. I expected the cancellation email. Instead, I got a short message that said, "I'm angry, but I know you'll fix it." That sentence hit harder than any metric I'd ever seen because it revealed something terrifying and powerful. At the same time, trust once earned can buy you time. But once broken, no amount of growth, hacks, branding, or capital can buy it back at the same price. Most founders think trust is a soft concept, something you talk about on culture slides or mission statements. It isn't. Trust is operational. It shows up in response times, in how pricing changes are communicated, in whether outages are acknowledged before users complain, in whether bad news travels faster internally or externally. Trust is built in 1,000 small moments where you choose transparency over convenience and long-term credibility over short-term optics. And the brutal part is this: users don't evaluate trust emotionally the way founders do. They evaluate it behaviorally. They stay, they leave, or they warn others. Early in my journey, I believed trust would come naturally if we just built a good product. That's half true and dangerously incomplete. A good product can earn initial trust. Sustained trust comes from how you behave when the product is imperfect, which it always will be. I've seen startups with mediocre products survive because users trusted the team, and startups with brilliant technology collapse because people felt misled, ignored, or treated like data points instead of humans. Trust doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency between what you say and what you do. The first real test of trust usually comes at the worst possible time when you're under pressure. Cash is tight. Investors are watching. Competitors are loud. That's when the temptation to hide, delay, or spin becomes strongest. I've sat in rooms where founders debated whether to disclose a problem or wait and see if anyone notices. Every time that question is asked, trust is already at risk. Users are not stupid. Silence feels like disrespect. Delay feels like manipulation. And even if you get away with it, once the internal habit you form is corrosive. You teach yourself that trust is negotiable, and that belief will surface again when the stakes are higher. What many founders underestimate is how trust compounds internally before it ever shows up externally. Teams that trust leadership move faster, argue more honestly, and recover from mistakes with less damage. Teams that don't trust leadership slow everything down with second-guessing politics and quiet disengagement. You cannot build external trust on top of internal distrust. Employees are your first users, and they leak truth whether you want them to or not. If your team doesn't believe you'll do the right thing when it's hard, your customers eventually won't either. Trust also shapes how you grow. When trust is high, users forgive rough edges, accept change, and even defend you publicly. When trust is low, every experiment feels like a risk. Every update triggers suspicion, and every mistake is interpreted as intent instead of error. This is why trust is not just moral capital, it's strategic capital. It lowers friction everywhere. It reduces support costs. It shortens sales cycles. It buys you patience when reality doesn't cooperate. But unlike money, trust can't be raised in a round. It's earned transaction by transaction. One of the most uncomfortable realizations I had was that trust forces you to slow down in moments when speed feels urgent. You can't surprise users with major changes and expect gratitude. You can't quietly degrade quality and hope no one notices. You can't promise timelines you know are fantasy just to keep momentum alive. Founders who treat trust as a renewable resource burn it fastest. Those who treat it as fragile behave differently. They underpromise. They communicate early. They absorb pain themselves instead of exporting it to users. There is also a personal side to this that rarely gets discussed. Building trust requires emotional endurance. You have to face disappointment directly. You have to admit mistakes publicly. You have to sit with criticism without becoming defensive. This is exhausting, especially when you're already carrying the weight of survival. Many founders don't lose trust because they're dishonest. They lose it because they're tired. Fatigue leads to shortcuts, and shortcuts are visible to people who rely on you. Over time, I came to see trust as the only real moat startups can build early. Technology can be copied. Pricing can be undercut. Distribution can be rented. Trust cannot be replicated without time and consistent behavior. It's why some small companies feel bigger than they are, and some big companies feel hollow. Trust is not about being liked. It's about being predictable in your integrity, even when outcomes are uncertain. And this is where the story tightens, because once you understand that trust is the foundation of everything else, you reach the moment where growth opportunities start demanding compromises that feel small in isolation, but heavy in aggregate. And the sentence doesn't end here, because it carries directly into what happens next, when founders must decide whether to protect trust at the cost of speed or sacrifice it quietly in exchange for momentum as the pressure increases and the choice becomes unavoidable. And you realize that the next decision you make will either reinforce the foundation you've been laying, brick by brick, or introduce the first crack that will spread later when no one is watching and everything depends on what you do next, or trading it quietly for momentum becomes the real temptation. Because trust is slow and pressure is loud, and when investors want numbers and the market wants movement, it's easy to convince yourself that one small compromise won't matter, that users won't notice that you'll fix it later. And this is how trust rarely dies in a dramatic collapse, but instead erodes through a series of decisions that each feel reasonable in isolation and disastrous in total. I've lived through that phase. The pricing tweak we didn't clearly explain, the roadmap promise we knew was optimistic, but hoped we'd somehow catch up to, the support response we delayed because we were overwhelmed and told ourselves it was temporary. None of these felt like betrayal in the moment. They felt like survival. But users don't experience your context. They experience your behavior. And behavior is the only language trust understands. What separates founders who preserve trust from those who lose it is not morality, it's courage under constraint. Courage to say no to growth that comes from confusion. Courage to slow a launch until it's honest. Courage to tell users we don't know yet, instead of inventing certainty. These decisions often cost you in the short term. Deals fall through. Metrics dip. Competitors look faster. But something else happens beneath the surface. The people who stay lean in harder. The relationship deepens. Trust turns from fragile goodwill into resilience. The hardest lesson for me was learning that trust is asymmetric. You can lose it faster than you can rebuild it. One bad surprise outweighs 10 good updates. One hidden change outweighs months of transparency. That asymmetry forces discipline. It means you don't get to spend trust casually, even when you think you've earned enough. There is no savings account. There is only ongoing behavior. Trust also clarifies leadership. When you commit to protecting it, many decisions make themselves. You stop asking, "Can we get away with this?" and start asking, "Would we be proud to explain this openly?" That single question filters out an incredible amount of bad strategy. It simplifies complexity. It aligns teams. People work differently when they believe the company will choose integrity over convenience. They take more responsibility because they feel safe telling the truth upward. And that internal honesty is what prevents small issues from becoming public failures. Over time, you realize that trust is not the opposite of speed. It's the foundation of sustainable speed. Teams that trust each other don't waste time covering themselves. Customers who trust you don't need to be convinced at every step. Partners who trust you are flexible when things go wrong. Trust removes friction that no process or tool can eliminate. It is invisible when present and painfully obvious when gone. In the end, building trust is not a branding exercise. It's a daily operational choice. It's choosing clarity over cleverness, accountability over excuses, and long-term reputation over short-term relief. Startups that last are not the ones that never make mistakes, but the ones that respond to mistakes in a way that makes people say, "I'll give them another chance." If you're building right now and feeling the pressure to cut corners just to keep up, pause and ask yourself what kind of company you're actually constructing beneath the metrics. And if this reflection resonated, leave a comment and share a moment when trust changed the trajectory of your startup for better or worse. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring the real foundations of companies that survive beyond hype. Because growth will always be noisy. But trust is what decides whether the noise turns into something enduring or fades the moment attention moves on.